Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are watching from around the world. I'm John Snell. We are here at Bob Reeves Brass. It is so great to be back live doing a Q&A. I just realized the other day it's been about 4 months since our last Q&A. It was early, I think, November. We had Simon Sweeney on here. And we have our special guest today is another Australian, a little bit further away this time, all the way from Perth, Australia, Adrian Kelly. And we'll be bringing Adrian on here in a minute. He was recently featured on our podcast, The Other Side of the Bell, which if you are not familiar with, go check it out. The Other Side of the Bell, we have almost 90 episodes now of interviews with trumpet players, literally from around the world. It's available at bobreeves.com and also on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, and any other app that you happen to use to listen to your podcasts. That is The Other Side of the Bell. Other than that, let me introduce our guest today. Adrian Kelly, like I'd mentioned, lives in Perth, Australia, and he's been all over the world. He was in Hong Kong for a while, played everything from with pop stars like Jackie Chung to chamber music to you name it. And in Perth, he also teaches a lot. He's getting his doctorate, which we're going to cover some. And again, runs the gamut of playing, everything from musicals to jazz to pop to classical. And most recently, within the last year, he's released 2 albums. One called Visions, that is actually includes art from his father that we'll talk about. And so it's interactive. You listen to the music on his website while watching beautiful paintings of his father's artwork. And then the other one, Cry Wolf, which is more electric and involves some artificial intelligence. So we'll get into that as well. So without further ado, let's bring in my special guest today, Adrian Kelly. Adrian, how you doing today?
Hey, great. Thanks, John.
Isn't technology amazing? We're like, 15,000 miles away or something? I mean, probably as far around the globe as you can get, and here we are having a nice conversation about trumpet.
I think so, yeah. So one of the few things to have come out of the last year is that we're getting to do a lot more of this.
Right? Yeah, and we got to do our podcast interview over Zoom, which we wouldn't have been able to do until we got to meet up the next time. Either we were down in Australia or next ITG or something, whenever that would be. So glad we were able to get you on onto the podcast. So first things first, I want to talk. When we did do the interview, it was a few months ago, and things were still kind of in lockdown. But since then, you've actually been able to do some playing, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to actually play a gig?
Yeah, it's we've been really lucky down here. We've been open for almost 6 months now. We had a brief lockdown a couple of weeks ago, but other than that, we're kind of back to playing. The venues that were like 66% capacity for the most part, so we're not packing them in, but people seem to be flooding back to the arts, which is really great to see. People are going out and seeing live music whenever they can, and yeah, it's been really great.
That's awesome. And so what was it like feeling like actually getting to play with musicians after being like locked up in a practice room for months?
It was a little strange for a few minutes.
Yeah.
You know, they don't play like a backing track.
But, kind of like riding a bike after taking a break.
Yeah.
A little wobbly at first, but
once we got back into it, it was very, very enjoyable. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great to hear, and it gives us hope. Here in the U.S., we're not back to live music. There's some studio work going on, but I can't wait for the day to get live music going again. And with vaccines and stuff, I don't think it's too far in the future. So
yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, and it's well worth the wait.
Well, we already have some questions coming in, which I'll get to, and I should mention to those of you viewing. This is where you get to ask the questions. Normally during the podcast, I'm the one in the hot seat, so throw your questions down in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, I can see them right here on the screen, and you'll be able to ask Adrian live. And one other thing we like to do is connect around the world. So besides the questions, show us some love by hitting that like or heart button, but then also put in the comments where you're viewing from, because it helps us connect and realize we're all just crazy trumpet players when it comes down to it. So the first question is coming from Facebook from Dylan. And Adrian, are you any relation to Kelly of Kelly Mouthpieces?
No, I'm not.
No, okay. So sorry to disappoint you, Dylan, but yeah, different Kelly. But the next question is coming in from Kevin from YouTube, and it is about mouthpieces. He wants to know what you use, and I know you also play a lot of different kinds of music. So, do you switch off depending on the kinds of music?
I do. So my mouthpiece collection is extensive and quite embarrassing. But at the moment, I'm playing a GR64M. I've been using that for around 6 months or so. But on regular rotation, I have a Reeves 41 dynamic mass that I use quite regularly, probably more for jazz playing. I have a couple of Pickett mouthpieces that I use. I use their 7C for most of my legit work. So I play quite small rims, I guess, compared to a lot of guys. But I've got really thin lips and it just works. I've tried playing the larger gear and it kind of feels like I'm sticking my head in a bucket. So, I played Monet for a long time. I played that during a run of Aladdin. I was swapping out between a few of those during the show. But then when I switched to Yamaha, the Monet didn't really sit so well with those, and I just felt I was working a bit too hard, which is when I went back. Because I was playing Reeves all through uni, so it's probably been like 20, 25 years I've been playing Reeves, and I keep kind of going back to them, coming away from them, and using them as like a benchmark to see where I'm at, things like that. So, those like the Reeves and the GR and the Pickett, they're probably the ones that I go with the most, I think, and they just seem to suit at the moment in the kind of music that I'm playing.
Awesome. And kind of a follow-up to that then, when you are switching back and forth, because you do a lot of different kinds of playing, what role does the equipment play for you? And that includes, as you mentioned, you're a Yamaha artist. What about your horns? What are you looking specifically in your horns and your mouthpieces? Like, say, if you're playing in jazz, you mentioned, or if you're playing with a chamber orchestra, things like that. How do you know which one, how do you line up your equipment for the gig?
Well, there's a lot of experimentation in the practice room for a start, but it's more about making it easy to get the sound that I want is the main reason that I switch. You can kind of play anything on anything, really, but, some mouthpieces are going to make it easier to play bright. Some mouthpieces are going to make it easier to have like a nice soft articulation if I'm playing jazz, or some are going to give me a crisper articulation. And it's just about which mouthpiece makes which aspects of my playing easier. And then same with the instruments. The whole reason I switched to Yamaha was just the ease of response that I felt on those instruments. And I don't switch instruments too often, but I've got a couple that I'd probably switch out on a legit gig compared to a show or a jazz gig. And it's just for the ease of production of the sound that I'm looking for.
Interesting. Yeah. The ease of production. Yeah, that's a great thing that a lot of people don't talk about. They talk about intonation or sound, but really, or I think maybe someone, would you call that maybe response too, the ease of production?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Response is really important. You just want it to come out when you want it to come out, not when the trumpet tells you it's going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's and kind of wrapped in with that is the quality of sound. I don't want to be having to work hard to play with a round, open, big sound if I'm in an orchestra, trying to make that sound on on some shallow gear that's more set up for a brighter sound. I don't want to be working that hard. I'm getting too old. I don't want to work hard.
Right. We tell that a lot of our clients who call us, they're getting older. You may not have the physical ability you have when you're 20, but you're also wiser. You know better. You can to play easier. So we got a lot of folks checking in this, and thank you both, Dylan and Kevin, for your questions. And Kevin says he's a big fan of the 1.5C 2424. So that is definitely a lot bigger than what you're using.
Yeah, that's the bucket I was referring to earlier.
Right.
Great for those that can play it.
But it goes to show. I mean, we get I don't know, pigeonholed or kind of a tunnel vision sometimes to think if you're playing classical music, you have to use a large diameter, and not necessarily the case. It's sound concept, like you're saying, and response, and a lot of that has to do with playing, not just getting the dark sound, right?
Yeah, that's my feeling on the matter. Yeah.
And so we have Dylan's checking in from Charlotte, North Carolina, and Larry's checking in from LA. Hey, Larry, good to see you. He's a good buddy of mine. And Dylan was following up. We have a Australia connection. Dylan says he owns a custom Yamaha C Piccolo that he got from Daniel Mendelow of the Sydney Symphony. So I don't know if you know Daniel or
Not personally, but of course I know of that. Yeah.
Well, that horn now exists in North Carolina. Now it's it's on the live stream, so it's got to be official. Adrian, we got a lot of questions from your Cry Wolf album. A lot of people were interested in the artificial intelligence and how you integrate that into jazz. Can you speak a little bit more to that and how that came about, and then what it was like as a player utilizing artificial intelligence?
Yeah, sure. So that all started when I was living in Hong Kong. I met a composer called Wing San Wong up there. And we got to talking, and I was messing around with electronics at the time. I was using a bunch of pedals. I was trying to add, I kind of built this contraption that sat on my trumpet so I could push buttons that triggered the computer to do things. I was using kind of some Ableton Live stuff. I was messing around with that, not always successfully, I must admit. Mm-hmm. And I got talking to Wing San Wong, and he's also a programmer. So he has a background in coding and things like that. So I talked to him about, how could we make the computer so that not so much that I have to drive it and I'm triggering it, but the computer's just listening and responding, just like any jazz musician would on a gig. You're listening and responding to all the other band members. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay, we'll leave it with me. And he came back with this app that he programmed in the Max MSP platform. And we connected that to an iPad graphic interface so that I can, so I run, each member of the band has a feed into the computer, and then I can select which member of the band the computer's listening to, and then ask the computer to either play melodically or as an accompaniment. And so that's kind of the only controls I have. I deliberately didn't ask what it was actually doing under the hood, so I don't really know the ins and outs of how it does it. But it, from playing with a lot, sometimes it will loop small sections and octave transpose them. Sometimes it will kind of just create sounds in response to the tones that it's hearing. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that it'll do. But like I said, I'm not exactly sure how it does it. And then I just kind of start and stop it kind of when I feel it's warranted on the gig. So I quite often, like if I've done a few tunes where I do like a slow intro and I play with some delay, and I'll trigger that as the accompaniment, so the other members of the band can take a rest, and I'm just playing with the computer. Other times it works really great. It picks up guitar really well. So my guitarist in the quartet, Simon Jeans, he's just got a great language. His playing is just really expressive and kind of goes in directions you don't expect. It's really amazing. And when the computer's listening to him play, it's almost like they're playing a duet. And because they're both electronic sounds, really blends great together and comes up with some magic.
That's awesome. And that's available through your website, right?
Yeah. Cry Wolf, it's also on iTunes, I think, and maybe some other streaming platforms. But yeah, if you head to the website, you can listen to it all there.
Awesome. And we'll throw the link down in the chat. I put it on Facebook. I can't put it on YouTube right now, but it will be in the YouTube link. And we'll also throw it up in the descriptions for those of you that are watching this after the fact, not live. We'll make sure we have the links to Adrian's websites and all of his albums. Yes, so Dylan was mentioning if you're familiar with John DeVersa and any of his albums.
Yeah, I have a passing familiarity.
Yeah, John. Really, yeah, he's Actually, I know him. He taught at CSUN, Cal State Northridge, out here in LA, and I think he's down in Miami now. But he does a lot of progressive big band stuff and some amazing writing as well.
Really kind of thrilling.
And a really nice guy to boot. So you can't.
Right, there you go.
Next question coming in is about versatility. Adrian, if you could speak a little bit about how you prepare yourself, either mentally or physically, depending on the different jobs you're doing. And I know you're doing a lot of stuff in Perth, but I know when you were in Hong Kong, you were touring with Jackie, doing pop stuff, and then playing with the chamber orchestra. So, how would you prepare yourself for those kinds of playing situations?
Yeah. So in terms of just like straight before the gig and the warm up before the gig and things like that, I just do the same thing. Doesn't really matter what the gig is. I have like a routine sort of based on Stan, which is actually the beginning of my practice. But in terms of the long-term preparation to be able to do that, I listen very widely to a lot, a broad cross section. So I don't just listen to jazz. I don't just listen to pop. I listen to across the gamut, just so I have that oral understanding and of where the styles are and what kind of playing sits in those styles. And then in my practice routine, I do a lot of I practice the versatility basically. So once I've got my warm up and my fundamentals out of the way, I'll do some classical etudes, and then I'll follow that up with some like short excerpts. I've just started using Paul Barron's new book, the Trumpet, the excerpts from the music theatre, which is great. And then I'll follow that up with some big band lead charts, and then I'll play a bit of jazz, and I'll kind of cycle through, and I won't do too many things back to back, so I'm kind of practicing the versatility.
So part of it's mindset and listening, and then part of it is that just physical preparation.
Yeah, sounds like. Yeah, I think before the gig as well, like I always try and find a few minutes just of quiet time, just to kind of get ready. Think about the music that you're about to play, and maybe just kind of recall some of those recordings that you've been listening to. Yeah, I think that's a really important part of my preparation, is just to have a little bit of quiet time.
Right, we all need that sometimes, especially if you have kids.
Yeah,
but that's another podcast. That's another live stream.
I was going to sleep last night. So.
And I should mention, I meant to mention up front. I mean, in Perth, it's just after 8 a.m. there. So I want to thank you for getting up early before most trumpet players are even alive to get up and not only make yourself presentable, but speak intelligently about music and artificial intelligence and all the other stuff we're going to get into. We have a lot of friends checking in. Oh, my good buddy Joe Leva, who also does his own, with his virtual trumpet ensemble, does wonderful interviews and streams. So good to see you, Joe. And he said, Mr. Kelly, thank you for all the amazing information. So a shout out to you, Adrian. And Christian Goldsmith says, "Yo, Adrian from Hong Kong." So
hey,
we are got players checking in. Christian was a LH trombone player out here, so good to see Christian.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'll have to tell my buddy Noah, who grew up with him. He's on the stream as well. I want to talk some about the research you're doing for your doctorate, because besides all the other stuff you're doing with your jazz quartet and playing, you're also getting your doctorate, right?
Yeah, I'm working towards a PhD, and my thesis is all about playing trumpet in musical theatre. So it's a lot about the versatility and kind of getting the physical mastery that you need to be able to play shows, the kind of technical things, and then I'm actually taking an acting method and then reinterpreting it so that we can play. So they're having an awareness of that acting method. Kind of, we create a link with the stage, and we can play and hopefully support them even better than we do now.
Interesting. So when you're sitting down in the pit, we're not just reading a book and clipping our fingernails and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So what has your research turned up? I mean, can we get into it a little bit, or is that reserved for the thesis or the dissertation? Sorry, master's thesis, doctor's dissertation.
Yeah, I'm always wary of just unloading all the information on people. There was a few different areas. So in a nutshell, the acting side of things, it would be like in the show West Side Story, when Tony and Maria sing Tonight, or actually a better example would be the balcony scene, which is like the famous scene, right?
Yeah.
So the way that we would naturally just phrase that as musicians would be we'd take some liberties, we'd make it big and soaring and all that kind of thing. But if you think about the play, they're teenagers. It's like first love. They're kind of excited, and if you imagine the way that young people act in that kind of situation, they're not going to be lugubrious about it. They're going to be kind of a little bit. They're going to be kind of, in musical terms, they're going to be sitting up on the beat. They're going to be maybe pushing a little bit sharp. They're going to be a little bit breathless, so maybe not quite the big long phrases, maybe shorter phrases. And so when you start thinking about that and how maybe the actors are portraying those characters, and we start doing the same in the pit, then hopefully we're working together and we create this kind of this link that then the audience really gets that exaggerated feeling. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so you're relating more. So in terms of the etudes that you've come up with, how do those work into that?
So that's more about the technical side of things. So at the time when I started this, there weren't any excerpts that you could go and get for musical theatre. The only way you had access to scores was if you were playing a show, if you had some sneaky copies. So I wanted a way to be able to practice theatre repertoire without actually having access to theatre repertoire. And also I just wanted to be able to do it quickly. You don't want to spend hours playing through Book of Mormon or playing through the Book of Aladdin or whatever it is. So I went through, I should backtrack a little bit. So I surveyed, I think it ended up being about 94, 95 trumpet players around the world that were actively playing musical theatre as part of their regular work. And from there, I asked a bunch of questions about what they found difficult, what they thought was really idiomatic for the trumpet in musical theatre and things like that, and kind of whittled that down to a list of 10 or so musical theatre productions. So I went through those productions and pulled out what I found were the difficult passages, and then I created 8 etudes around those. And so they cover, there's a little bit of piccolo playing, there's some flugelhorn playing, there's some cornet playing, then there's a lot of trumpet playing, and it covers there's one that's a lot of the wide intervals that you might find in music theatre repertoire. There's one that there's a bunch of mute stuff. There's some tricky articulations, unusual articulations that maybe come out, some difficult rhythms that might crop up from time to time. So I kind of condensed all those into these 8 etudes that hopefully, if you can play through them, you can get through them in half an hour-ish. Well, probably less, maybe 20 minutes. But if you can play through those, you're pretty much covering all the difficult stuff that you might find in a musical theatre production. It just sorts out your technique, basically, to make sure that that's on track before you start doing all the acting.
Yeah, that's amazing and great. And what's interesting to me is, I mean, I don't know about your schooling, but in mine, it's like there's so much focus on the classical repertoire and etudes, and I'm not etudes, the orchestral excerpts and the solo literature, which is all fine and dandy. But then when you graduate and you realize, well, there's not a whole lot of community orchestra gigs that are playing Tchaikovsky 4 or Mahler 5, but there are a lot of community musical theater and professional musical theater and your ringers for college and high school theater groups. And that's some of those excerpts from the musical theory, especially some of the more modern ones, even Spamalot or Seussical, the musical. I sat down and was like, what am I getting myself into? Would have been nice to have seen some of these licks maybe a few months in advance to practice. I've been practicing Petrushka for 20 years. So it's great that you have those the excerpts of the etudes and starting to prepare people for something that they're likely to play and in an amateur or a professional kind of setting. So and those you have available also on your website as well?
The link is there on the website. I think they're available through Q Press Music.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll make sure we have the links to those as well.
They're a PDF download, so yeah.
Awesome. And so we've got a lot of people just joining us. So if you are joining us, first thing, everyone has a couple jobs to do. Number one is they have to show us some love. So hit that like or share or subscribe wherever you're viewing from, whether it's on YouTube or on Facebook. And so that's number one. Let us know in the comments where you're viewing from. And then most importantly, ask your questions for Adrian Kelly. He's joining us. We got another 15 minutes or so. And if you've missed some of it, all of this live Q&A will be archived on our YouTube channel. So head over to the Bob Reeves Brass YouTube channel. I know Dylan, he's been asking questions and he found our YouTube channel and subscribed. So thank you very much, Dylan. Dylan has a few questions. One of them, yes, is for me. I do work for Bob Reeves Brass, and so if you want to give me a call at the shop, Dylan, you can call me anytime. I'll be happy to talk to you. And the other one, Adrian, is between us. We look alike, maybe our glasses, but as far as I'm concerned, we are not related. Is that correct?
I'm pretty sure we're not related.
Similar glasses, and we both chose a black collared shirt today, so it's just...
I'm a theatre musician. Black's just my natural go-to.
Safe color to wear. Joseph Leva has a question, and he asks, being a musical theater trumpeter means you have to be very accurate, sometimes in very tough conditions. What has helped you be accurate and focused in the pit to be very consistent?
Great question. A couple of things. So in terms of just the trumpet playing thing, the biggest thing to do with accuracy is that I make sure that I limit the number of moving parts. So the way I play, it's just I breathe, I get the compression going, then I just leave it set. Same with the embouchure, I just set it and forget it. And then most of the, then I'm just using the back of my tongue as to control the airstream, to control the airspeed. And so then I've only got one moving part. Whereas if you're trying to coordinate different air speeds from your dive, pushing from your guts, and then you're trying to line up your lips specifically for one note, and then your tongue position as well, you're trying to coordinate all these three things and more. It's it becomes a bit of a it becomes a bit tricky to be accurate. Mm-hmm. So I just try and think about keeping everything still. And I'm sure there's things moving, and I'm sure that it's not as simple as that. But that's the way I think about it, just to keep everything still and pound out the notes. In terms of a mental thing, I've become pretty good at turning off in the rests. So I just so I'm not burning energy, like worrying about things coming up and stuff like that. I just kind of know where my next entry is, turn off for a while, and then when it's time, you just pick it up and go, and try not to think about it too much.
Yeah, that's a great point. It reminds me of something Gary Grant used to say out here about getting in the zone, where yeah, he would flip. If for him in the studio, if the lights on, your go time, and if you're not, it's like you're saying, you have to conserve your energy, and
Yeah.
yeah, not worry about what's coming up, and also just switch off so that you can be in the zone and give it 100%. So that's interesting how you describe that. Um,
Part of that is part of that not worrying is being prepared in the practice room so that you know you can hit those notes, right? So
Confidence comes from the from the practice room. Great
that's it.
advice. It's so awesome to have you here, Adrian. And yeah, we got a lot of people checking in from all around the world. Joseph's over there in Arizona, so a little bit hotter than where we are here. I think. I don't know. The whole Midwest is freezing right now. And it's so cool to talk about trumpet and jazz and all that kind of stuff. I do want to talk a little bit more because we also got some questions about your album. I guess you can call it an album, right? Visions. It's more of a
Yeah.
project, right? That involves your father's artwork. Robert John Kelly was a great artist. And can you talk us through that? I mean, you described it in the podcast, but for those who haven't listened, can you just talk about how that project came along and what it
Yeah.
is?
So, my father passed away in 2010, and then towards the end of that year, I had the opportunity to work with a quartet of a bass player and a guitarist and a vocalist, and myself. We had a gig at the local jazz society, and so I wrote. I got my dad's artwork and picked a few of those out, and then wrote some music to accompany the art. And on the gig, we had the art projected up on a screen above us, and it worked really well. But then a couple of months later, I moved to Hong Kong, and so that project kind of got put on hold. And then when I got back, and last year, we all had a lot of time at home. So I kind of pulled that out of retirement and into the music again, and tweaked a few things. And we went into the studio and recorded it, and then I scanned my father's artwork, and we put it together as little videos on a website. So there's kind of the goal being that it's like an interactive gallery. So you go in and you look at the artwork, and whereas in a gallery you might see the little placard with the writing about the art, rather than the little placard, you have the music, and the music is commenting on not just on the feelings of the artwork, but feelings about my memories of my dad creating the art, and also kind of where the art was hung in our house, and the various places that I've experienced that art, loading it into various galleries and things like that. I was kind of my dad's roadie when I was younger, and yeah, that's kind of how it came about. And the music is really free and it's very improvised. I kind of just sketched out a few motifs, sometimes with rhythm, sometimes without, and kind of had pretty vague directions on how to maybe interpret that, and then just let the quartet go with it. And they've seen the artwork, they kind of know what's going on there, and then it just becomes like an interaction, kind of guided by the material that I composed, rather than kind of anything that's prescriptive.
What a beautiful project! I mean, I just can't imagine something that personal and intimate and the creation of your reactions to your father's artwork, and I mean down to, like you're saying, where it was hung in the house and things like that. I mean, it just to be able to put so much of yourself and your experience into one work of one project must have been, I don't know. I mean, it seems exhausting to me, just emotionally exhausting. What was it for you, or was it kind of freeing?
I think it was probably more like freeing. It's good to be able to express those things, and also, I wrote the music not, within a year of him passing, so that was kind of wound in there as well. And I think it was 10 years ago. But I think when I was composing it, I don't feel like it was a struggle to get it out, because it's just a part of me, right? Like, where they were hung in the house and the experiences with the artwork and the experiences with my father, they're just a part of me. So it was just I basically just picked up my trumpet or sat at the piano, played some lines, were like, yeah, that's it, and write it down. And I'm so lucky to work with the quartet, Pete Jevons on bass and Simon Jeans on guitar, Victoria Newton singing, and just being able to trust those. I've worked with those people for such a long time that I knew that I could trust them with it, to just hand it over and see what happens.
And the results of which are on your website along with the artwork, and it's amazing an experience to sit there and listen while viewing the artwork. And now, for those of you that are watching this and knowing the background and the context, go check it out. Again, we'll have the links to that. It's Adrian Kelly Quartet is the website if you want to head over there now. But then once we wrap up here, we'll make sure all the links are in the comments and in the description. Yeah. So
the music's on iTunes, but I do encourage you to go and see it in the gallery.
It's the whole experience. So it's a very emotional topic. Just talking about it. It's kind of weird. We'll go back to equipment after this. Before we do that, I'll do a little segue and just mention, for those of you just joining us, we are here with Adrian Kelly, trumpeter, all the way from Perth, Australia. And I have to mention that every time because I've always wanted to go to Perth, and it's so excited just to talk to someone from there. And I didn't realize this. There's 2 million people in Perth. And I always think of it as like a kind of a big city, but not a big city like LA or a metropolitan city. But it's just 2 million people, so there's still humanity there, I guess, right?
Yeah, we're starting to get serious.
You have things like restaurants and theaters and stuff. Yeah. But besides the bad joke, it does kind of lead to my question. What advice would you give to someone who is living in a place like Perth in terms of building a career? Because it's not New York or LA where there's recording going on and things like that. I mean, I'm sure there is some recording in Perth, but so what are the kinds of things that, if someone wants to make a music career, what advice could you give them?
That's a great question. I think because it is quite a small scene, you need to be a great person and easy to get along with. Like it's too small to have. We probably can't swear on the podcast, but to have people that aren't friendly, and also because it is a small scene, you just got to make sure that when you turn up, you're doing the job. You can't really let anything slide, because if you fail in one gig, there isn't like a whole other scene for you to go and succeed in. It's like you've got to, because everyone knows everyone, right? So if you totally bomb out, or you don't show up on a gig, or you don't, you get drunk on a gig or something like that, word will get around the entire scene, not just that little area, or that little clique within the wider scene. Everyone's going to know about it. So there's that. And I'm not great at all the social media and all that kind of stuff, but I think that's probably a good way to go to get yourself outside of the city, outside of your small location. I'm talking to you in LA, and we've chatted, and travel is, well, when we can travel is relatively cheap now. You can fly to an ITG festival and meet people and talk to composers who can write you pieces, and which you can record and put on YouTube and get an audience that way as well.
Great.
I think the main thing is just be a good person.
Right. Great advice. Great advice. And unfortunately, my comments weren't refreshing, so I missed a bunch of them. So I'm not doing my job here. I get too wrapped up in what you're saying. So I want to jump around a little bit. Chuck Siorba, who's a good friend of ours. How you doing, Chuck? He says, sounds like it's a fascinating dissertation topic, and jumping back a few questions. Where are you getting your PhD?
It's at the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, which is it's a great school down here. It's there's an acting course and a music theatre course that turns out a lot of big music theatre stars. And there's classical, jazz, contemporary music, great composition course. And there's a great dance course as well. So it's great to be amongst all those different disciplines. Hugh Jackman went here. Musicians-wise, Troy Roberts went here. Linda O went here. It's a great school. And that's part of Edith Cowan University, which is one of the bigger universities in Perth.
Wonderful. So there you go, Chuck. So if we want to get a dissertation in a fun place, head down
here. We got great beaches as well.
Oh yeah. In fact, we were having a discussion with the shop about the Mediterranean climates and how Perth is one of the 5 in the world. So
right.
Again, we'll leave that for another podcast. Tuba Dylan is checking in. Dylan, I see all your questions. Some of them I can't answer right now. But this one will be for you, Adrian. And I love this. Tuba Dylan is a huge Yamaha fan, and I know you're a Yamaha artist. And we did speak a little bit about equipment. He has 2 Yamaha tubas, at least 7 Yamaha trumpets, and some Yamaha handmade guitars, and a Yamaha grand piano. So,
wow.
So he is a Yamaha fan. So could you speak to a little bit about your experience with Yamaha? Have you been to their factory in Tokyo, in Hamamatsu, or?
No. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance yet.
On your bucket list. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like being a Yamaha artist and working with them
how did it all come about? It was after I moved back from Hong Kong. I was just kind of shopping around, and I got to talking with some of the Yamaha people here. And I went and played. I went and played just a bunch of horns, like all different brands. And just when I jumped on the Yamaha, it just felt easy. And it felt easy to be me on it. So, and just like we were talking before, like just the response was really great. And then in terms of the support that I get, there's a great guy over East, Bray Grimes. He kind of deals with, he's a great repair and technical guy, and a great trumpet player as well. And so he kind of clues me in on a few little tweaks that you can make to the horns just to get them to liven up a bit or slot better and things like that. I have access to like my Bobby Shoe, it's the A310Z. I actually have the valve cap from, I think it's a Chicago B flat on there. The Chicago, or maybe it didn't be a Chicago C, I can't remember. But I have that on there. It's just a little bit heavier and just kind of helps the instrument slide a bit better. So I've got access to those kind of things and the technical guys that can tell me what that does. And I'm not. I'm a trumpet player, so I'm a geeky, but I'm not super geeky. And as long as it's working and it's playing great, then I'm happy. But sometimes Bray will give me a call and say, "Hey, try this." I'll give it a go and see. Actually, that makes it slot better. I'll keep that.
Yeah. So always looking, always open-minded for something new, but it's not a daily activity.
No.
Maybe every couple of days. Wonderful answer. Yeah, Yamaha is a wonderful company. I don't want to speak too much about them, but Dylan, if you want to call me and talk about our experience, our experience is primarily with the trumpets, doing the valve alignments on them. We actually sold Yamaha for a while in the late '90s and early 2000s, and it was a great experience. They're a great company to make great instruments, and they do everything from motorcycles to to grand pianos to trumpet.
A motorcycle as well, so
right. Oh yeah, there you go.
I I will say as well, one of the great things, because living in Perth, we get limited stock. So another great thing about Yamaha is they're super consistent. So I can, if I need another bobby shoe, hopefully I won't need one, but I can just order one and it's going to come and it's going to play exactly like my one. The consistency is a big thing living in a small place like Perth.
Yeah, and that's critical because with the job you have to do and the versatility of the things you have to play, you need your equipment to play for you.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, well, we're almost out of time, but this is a good question. And I think we touched on this a little bit in the podcast. Buzzing the mouthpiece, yay or nay?
Yay.
Yay?
But I'm a recent convert.
Really? Let's talk about that.
I've kind of played around with it a bit. I have always been really terrible at buzzing my lips. I won't demonstrate because it's embarrassing. But I kind of didn't think it was worth the effort to learn. And then I kind of cycled back to getting back into the stamp method. And he talks about buzzing at the beginning of that book, and I read some of the Thomas Stevens stuff and things. And then I actually, while we were locked down, I took some lessons with John Lewis out in LA via Zoom, and he's a great exponent of the stamp thing, and so he got me doing some buzzing as well. So I tried that, and it seems to work, and it's just part of my routine now. Like I buzz maybe 5 or 10 minutes before I get on the horn. Oh no, that's a lie. I start on the horn for like a couple of minutes, and then I buzz for maybe 5-10 minutes before I go back to the horn. And I found that it's made me, again, it's just contributed to the accuracy thing, I think. And it's kept my sound more consistent for longer. I find if I do buzzing, then my sound isn't affected by my endurance as much as maybe it used to be. As to why, I don't know.
Go with results. It's working. Well, that's great. And that question came from my buddy Mike Zonshine, who's a good, fabulous trumpet player in his own right, and he'll do. He's my guest interviewer on the other side of the bell, and he's a huge proponent of buzzing, and always gets on me for not asking. And he loved your episode of the podcast, and he's like, "You got to make sure you talk to him about that." So thank you, Mike, and thank you for the great answer, Adrian. And one last question, and this is Dylan again. He's been so patient. And it has an Aussie connection. So, are you familiar at all with the movie Dingo?
Yes.
With Miles Davis. I have not seen it, so that'll answer your question, Dylan. Have you seen it, Adrian? And what do you think about it?
I saw it a long time ago. That was filmed. I think that was filmed like while I was an undergrad, or somewhere around that time. And my trumpet teacher, when I was studying here, transcribed all Miles's solos so that Miles could play the correct fingering for the movie. And he was up there, and it's the band when they're is it Parapadu or somewhere, they're somewhere up north because it was filmed here, and the band is all West Australians, so I played with the bass player that's in that clip. I think I played with him in a band for like 4 years or something, so I know all those guys pretty well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have to see if it's on Netflix or Amazon. I have to find it somewhere. I
don't know where you can find that, actually.
Yeah, well, I'm sure with the internet I'll find a way, because now I feel like I'm uneducated. So I didn't know that it even existed. So thank you, Dylan, for the great question. And who'd have thought? Yeah. You knew you played with guys in the movie and in your neck of the woods. I can't believe, man, we've almost done an hour. The time flies. We get to chat trumpet and connect. I mean, thank you so much, Adrian, for getting up really early to do this, and also giving your time, because I know you're back in school and you're back to work. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks to everyone for the questions and checking in. And yeah.
And I mentioned, so Adrian Kelly Quartet is your website. Anywhere else people can find you?
Well, if you go to adriankelly.com, the links to the quartet and everything's on there.
Okay.
All links from there, yeah.
Awesome. So adriankelly.com, and we'll make sure if you're watching this in the future that we'll have the links to all of those places in the descriptions and in the comments section. So Adrian, thank you again so much. If you want to hang around for a minute, I'll wrap up, and then we can officially say goodbye to each other on Skype. But thank you all for watching. It's been an absolute honor to be back. And what a cool thing was to have Adrian join us from Perth, Australia. I mean, a zillion miles away, it seems like. And thank you so much for the great questions. It was a great conversation. We learned a lot. And if you haven't listened to his episode of the podcast, On the Other Side of the Bell, I believe it's episode 86. You can listen to that podcast on bobreeves.com. It's also available on iTunes or that's not iTunes, Apple Podcasts now is what they call it, Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. So there's really no excuse not to listen to the podcasts. And other than Adrian, we have another 87 or so episodes with other trumpet players. The last few, Steve Dillard, I should mention, he's episode 87, fabulous trumpet player in San Diego. And a lot of you may know him as the Horn Trader. One of the first internet stores to buy and sell used trumpets. He's our guest on episode 87. He will be joining us next week, so check out the schedule for that. We'll post that tomorrow. Steve Dillard will be live. And James Morrison is our latest guest on the podcast, another Aussie. James was on episode 88, so you don't want to miss that episode of The Other Side of the Bell. The other things I should mention before we head out here, please follow the shop. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. At some point, these live streams will only be on YouTube. We're going to stop doing them on Facebook. So make sure you head over to YouTube and subscribe over there and check out, because pretty soon our live streams will only be on YouTube. Other than that, I hope you are safe and healthy wherever you are around the world. Thank you again for joining us. A huge thank you to Adrian Kelly for so many great stories and such great advice. And until next time, I'm John Snell. And be safe, be healthy, and go practice some now. Bye-bye.